Every species wanted to chain Earth. Now they're on their knees part. When the stars looked different when you traveled faster than light. Commander Jake Morrison watched them streak past the viewport of the UES Defiance like silver rain. His crew had been exploring deep space for 3 months now, and they had found nothing but empty planets and silent void. Earth had finally cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel, and humanity was eager to meet their neighbors among the stars. Jake stood on the bridge with his second-in-command standing beside him. The sensor officer called out that something big was approaching. The screens lit up with data as dozens of ships dropped out of hyperspace around them. These vessels were massive and sleek and completely alien in design. Jake ordered his crew to hold position and prepare for first contact. His heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. The alien ships formed a perfect sphere around the Defiance. A communication signal came through and the computer worked to translate it. When the message finally played, Jake felt his excitement turn to ice. The voice was cold and mechanical, and it spoke with absolute authority. The speaker identified itself as Vector of the Galactic Council, and informed Jake that his ship had entered restricted space. All emerging civilizations were required to submit to Council law immediately. Jake asked what Council law meant. Vector appeared on the screen as a tall crystalline being that shimmered with inner light. The alien explained that humanity would be placed under protective custody. Earth must surrender all military weapons beyond basic defense systems. 20% of all resources would be given to the Council as tribute. Human expansion into space would be controlled and monitored. Council overseers would be stationed on Earth and all human colonies. Refusal would result in quarantine, and if humanity resisted, then extermination would follow. The bridge went silent. Jake looked at his crew and saw the same shock and anger on every face. He told Vector that he needed to consult with Earth before making any decisions. The crystalline being allowed this, but warned that the Council fleet would follow the Defiance back to human space. Humanity had 30 days to accept the terms or face the consequences. The journey back to Earth felt longer than it should have. Jake spent hours reviewing the recordings of the encounter. The Council spoke about protection, but their terms sounded like slavery. He wondered how many other species had faced this same choice, and how many had been forced to surrender their freedom. When the Defiance reached Earth orbit, the Council fleet followed and took up positions around the solar system. Their ships were visible from the surface, and panic spread across the planet. President Claire Hamilton immediately convened her top advisors in the Situation Room, deep beneath Washington. Jake was brought in to give his report along with all the data his ship had collected. General Paul Hendricks slammed his fist on the table. He argued that humanity should never bow to threats. Earth had fought too hard for freedom to give it up now. The general wanted to mobilize every ship and prepare for war. Diplomat Helen Carter disagreed and said that war against a galactic empire would be suicide. She believed negotiation was the only path forward. Perhaps the Council terms could be improved through diplomatic channels. President Hamilton listened to both sides, but she knew the decision ultimately rested with her. She ordered intelligence agencies to learn everything possible about the Council. Agent Danny Price led a covert team that hacked into Council communication networks. What they found was disturbing beyond measure. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Every single species that reached the stars was immediately enslaved through the same protective custody system. The Council maintained power by suppressing technology and keeping member species dependent. Any civilization that developed something new was forced to share it with the Council, who then restricted its use. Resources flowed upward to the Council elite while member species struggled with artificial scarcity. Rebellions had been attempted over the millennia, but all had been crushed with overwhelming force. Danny brought his findings to the president. The evidence was clear. The Council was not offering protection but chains. Every species in their empire lived under occupation, and none had the strength to break free because the Council controlled everything from weapons to medicine to food production. President Hamilton called for a global vote. Every nation on Earth would have a say in humanity's response. The debate raged across every platform and in every language. Some argued that survival meant submission. Better to live under Council rule than die in a hopeless war. Others insisted that freedom was worth any price. Humanity had crawled out of caves and crossed oceans and reached the stars through determination and courage. To surrender now would betray everything humans had ever fought for. The vote took 2 weeks. When the results came in, President Hamilton sat alone in the Oval Office staring at the numbers. 73% of humanity had voted to refuse the council terms. It was not unanimous, but it was clear. Earth would not accept chains. She scheduled a broadcast to be sent to the council fleet and to every human across the planet. The president sat at her desk wearing a simple suit with the flag behind her. When the cameras went live, she looked directly into them and spoke with quiet strength. She thanked the council for their offer, but stated that humanity must decline. Earth had not reached the stars to become subjects of an empire. Humans valued freedom above all else and would rather die free than live as slaves. She acknowledged that war might come and that the cost would be terrible, but some things were worth fighting for. The message ended with a single word that would echo across the galaxy. President Hamilton looked into the camera and said no. The council response was immediate. Vector appeared on screens across Earth with a final warning. Humanity had made a grave mistake. The council had given them a chance for peaceful integration. Now Earth would learn the price of defiance. The alien gave humanity 1 week to reconsider before military action would begin. General Hendricks mobilized Earth's defense forces. Every ship that could fly was armed and prepared for battle. Admiral Lisa Crane took command of the fleet, which numbered just 47 vessels against the 200 council warships surrounding the solar system. The odds were terrible, but no one spoke of surrender. Jake Morrison volunteered to lead the first line of defense. His crew on the Defiance prepared their ship for combat. They knew they were likely flying to their deaths, but not one person asked to be reassigned. All across Earth, people prepared for war. Factories retooled to produce weapons. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new technologies. Millions enlisted in the military services. The week passed in a blur of preparation and fear and determination. When the deadline arrived, the council fleet began moving toward Earth. Admiral Crane gave the order and the human fleet launched to meet them. The first battle for Earth's freedom was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same. Every species wanted to chain Earth. Now they're on their knees, Part 2. The council fleet moved through space like a wall of metal and fire. 200 warships advanced in perfect formation toward Earth, and their commanders expected quick victory. They had crushed 17 rebellions over the millennia, and this would be no different. A primitive species with barely 50 ships could not stand against the might of the Galactic Council. Admiral Lisa Crane watched the enemy approach from the bridge of her flagship. She had spent her entire career preparing for wars that never came, and now she faced impossible odds. Her 47 ships were outnumbered more than 4 to 1. The council vessels were larger and more powerful, and carried weapons that had ended civilizations. But Lisa had something the council did not expect. She had human determination and creativity, and a complete willingness to break every rule of warfare. The first engagement happened near Jupiter. Captain Ryan Blake commanded the destroyer EUS Retribution, and he led a squadron of 12 ships to meet the advancing enemy. The council fleet maintained their tight formation as they always did. Their tactics had not changed in 1,000 years because they had never needed to change. Victory had always been certain. Ryan ordered his ships to scatter. The destroyers broke formation and accelerated in different directions. The council ships fired their energy weapons, but the human vessels were already moving in unpredictable patterns. Ryan took his ship diving toward Jupiter's gravity well at a speed that made his crew grip their stations. The council ships followed, but they maintained safe distances and predictable courses. The Retribution skimmed the upper atmosphere of Jupiter and used the planet's immense gravity to slingshot around at impossible velocity. Ryan shut down his engines completely, and his ship became invisible to council sensors. In the silence of unpowered flight, the Retribution coasted past 3 enemy vessels. When Ryan gave the order, his crew fired every kinetic weapon they had at point-blank range. The council ships never saw it coming. Metal slugs moving at tremendous speed punched through their shields and hulls. 2 vessels exploded immediately, and the third spun out of control, leaking atmosphere and debris. Ryan's ship powered up again and raced away before the enemy could respond. Across the battlefield, similar tactics played out. Human ships used gravity wells and engine cutoffs and crazy maneuvers that should have been impossible. They fired and ran and struck from unexpected angles. The council fleet tried to adapt, but their commanders had no experience with this kind of warfare. Every battle in their history had been fought with formation and overwhelming firepower. When the engagement ended, the Council had lost 17 ships. The human fleet lost 2. The surviving Council vessels retreated in disorder, and their commanders sent urgent messages back to their leadership. Something was wrong. This species fought like nothing they had encountered before. On Earth, the first victory was celebrated, but everyone knew it was just the beginning. President Hamilton addressed the planet and urged everyone to keep working. The war was far from over, and humanity needed every advantage they could create. Factory worker Greg Patterson had never missed a day of work in 20 years. Now he worked triple shifts at a manufacturing plant that had been converted to produce weapons and ship components. Greg and millions like him slept 4 hours a night and spent the rest of their time building the tools of war. The factories ran constantly, and the output increased every day. Dr. Amy Liu led a team of scientists studying captured Council technology. They had recovered debris from the destroyed enemy ships, and what they found was fascinating. The Council technology was advanced, but it was also stagnant. The designs were thousands of years old with only minor improvements. The aliens had stopped innovating long ago. Their power came from hoarding knowledge, not from creating anything new. Amy discovered that Council shields operated on fixed frequencies. Their weapons followed predictable patterns. Everything about their technology was sophisticated but rigid. She began working on countermeasures and new weapons that could exploit these weaknesses. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez trained the first wave of zero-gravity assault troops. If human ships could board Council vessels, then the war could be taken directly to the enemy. Carlos drilled his Marines in tight corridor fighting and zero-gravity combat. The troops learned to use the confined spaces of starships to their advantage. The Council convened an emergency session at their capital world. The leadership could not understand what had happened. A primitive species had defeated their forces in open battle. This should have been impossible. The Council had technology and experience and overwhelming numbers. How could they lose? The debate among Council leaders revealed something troubling. They had become complacent over thousands of years. No species had seriously resisted them in living memory. The Council had forgotten how to fight a real war against a determined enemy. Their military had become a police force designed to intimidate rather than battle. War Master Zalkeen stepped forward and demanded command of the next assault. He was old even by Council standards, and he had crushed more rebellions than any other commander. Zalkeen argued that the Council had been too gentle. Humanity needed to see real power and real consequences. He requested 500 ships and permission to bombard human colonies until Earth surrendered. The Council leadership agreed. They gave Zalkeen everything he asked for and ordered him to end this rebellion quickly. The War Master departed immediately with the largest battle fleet assembled in centuries. Back in human space, Admiral Crane received intelligence about the incoming threat. Agent Danny Price had managed to maintain access to Council communications, and the news was grim. 500 ships were coming, and they were led by the Council's most ruthless commander. Zalkeen had a reputation for destroying entire planets to make examples. Crane called a meeting of all ship captains. They gathered in a secure facility on Mars and reviewed the situation. The odds had gotten worse, but no one suggested retreat. Captain Ryan Blake proposed a new strategy. If the Council wanted to bring overwhelming force, then humanity would not fight them directly. Instead, they would use speed and deception and strike where the enemy was weakest. The plan was risky and would require perfect coordination. Human ships would be divided into small, fast groups that could hit Council supply lines and support vessels. Meanwhile, a select team would attempt something that had never been done before. They would infiltrate Zalkeen's flagship and strike at the heart of the enemy command. Commander Sophie Turner volunteered to lead the infiltration mission. She was a Special Forces operator with experience in impossible situations. Sophie selected 11 soldiers from the best humanity had to offer. They trained in secret using captured Council equipment to learn how to move through alien ships without being detected. As Zalkeen's fleet entered human space, the War Master began his campaign of terror. He ordered the bombardment of human colonies on Mars and the outer moons. Civilian stations were destroyed without warning. Thousands died in the first attacks. Zalkeen broadcast a message demanding Earth's immediate surrender, or he would continue destroying every human settlement until nothing remained. The attack on civilians enraged humanity. President Hamilton gave Admiral Crane full authorization to use any means necessary. The time for measured responses was over. Earth would show the Council what happened when you threatened human families. Sophie Turner and her team launched toward the Council fleet in a small stealth ship. At the same time, human strike forces moved to attack Council positions across the solar system. The second phase of the war was beginning, and this time humanity would take the fight directly to the enemy. Every species wanted to chain Earth. Now they're on their knees, Part 3 War Master. Zalkeen stood on the bridge of his massive flagship and watched the destruction of another human colony. The station orbiting one of Jupiter's moons broke apart under sustained fire, and debris scattered into space. He felt satisfied that his message was clear. Humanity would learn that defiance brought only death. Commander Sophie Turner watched the same destruction from her stealth ship, hidden among the debris field. She and her team of 11 soldiers had been trailing the Council fleet for days, waiting for the right moment. Sophie felt rage at the senseless killing, but she kept her emotions locked down. Anger could wait. Right now she needed cold focus. The Council flagship was enormous and heavily shielded. Getting inside would be nearly impossible through conventional means. But Sophie had studied the captured Council technology and found something interesting. The aliens were arrogant. They never considered that a primitive species might infiltrate their vessels. Their internal security was designed to keep crew members in line, not to stop intruders. Sophie piloted her small ship toward a debris field created by a destroyed human transport. She positioned her vessel among the wreckage and waited. When Council salvage teams arrived to collect technology samples, Sophie's team attached themselves to the outside of a Council shuttle. The magnetic clamps held them in place as the shuttle returned to the flagship. Once inside the hangar bay, the 12 humans slipped away in the confusion. They moved through maintenance corridors using stolen access codes that Agent Danny Price had provided. The layout of Council ships was standardized, which made navigation easier. Sophie led her team deep into the vessel toward the primary communication hub. They encountered only 2 guards along the way. The Council soldiers were shocked to see humans aboard their ship, and that moment of surprise was fatal. Sophie's team moved with ruthless efficiency, and the bodies were hidden before any alarm could be raised. The communication hub was exactly where intelligence had indicated. Sophie's technical specialist began working immediately. Their mission was not sabotage. They had come to do something far more damaging. They were going to tell the truth. Back in human-controlled space, Captain Nick Freeman commanded a small fleet of experimental vessels. His ships were barely tested and held together with improvised modifications. But they had one advantage. They could manipulate solar radiation in ways the Council had never imagined. Nick positioned his 7 ships in a careful formation between the Sun and an approaching Council battle group. The enemy fleet consisted of 40 vessels moving in standard formation. Their sensors detected the human ships, but the Council commanders were not concerned. 7 ships against 40 was suicide. Nick waited until the Council fleet was in perfect position. Then he gave the order. His ships deployed massive reflective panels that had been constructed in lunar orbit. The panels unfolded into precise angles and suddenly concentrated. Solar radiation hit the Council ships with devastating force. The enemy shields had been designed to stop. Weapons, not raw stellar energy, focused through mirrors. The intense heat overloaded their systems. Ships began to drift as their power plants shut down automatically to prevent meltdown. The Council fleet was disabled without a single shot being fired. Human boarding teams moved in immediately. They captured the helpless vessels and took their crews prisoner. More importantly, they seized intact Council technology, including detailed star charts and military databases. Private First Class Kevin Shaw was part of the boarding team that entered a Council cruiser. He was a combat engineer, and his job was to secure the ship's reactor. Kevin moved through the engine room, studying the alien technology with fascination. The faster-than-light drive was elegant in design, but as Kevin examined it closer, he noticed something odd. The drive systems were built with multiple redundancy layers. Every component had backups and safety systems. The Council had engineered their ships to be incredibly stable and safe. But that stability came with a weakness. The drives all operated on the same basic principles with the same fundamental power frequencies. Kevin took detailed scans and sent them back to Earth. Dr. Amy Liu received the data and immediately understood its significance. If all Council ships use similar drive systems, then a weapon could be designed to target that specific vulnerability. She assembled her team and they began working around the clock. On the Council flagship, Sophie Turner had successfully accessed the communication network. Her technical specialist bypassed security protocols and began uploading files. These were not random documents. They were carefully selected records that Agent Danny Price had stolen from Council databases. Evidence of how the Council had enslaved every member species. Proof of resources stolen over thousands of years. Documentation of rebellions crushed and populations subjugated. The upload went to every Council ship in every member world. Billions of beings across the galaxy suddenly had access to the truth. The Council had maintained power through lies and manufactured consent. Now those lies were exposed. Sophie knew that alarms would trigger as soon as the upload completed. She gathered her team and they moved quickly toward the hangar bay. They fought through confused Council security forces who could not understand how humans had penetrated so deep into their flagship. 2 of Sophie's soldiers were wounded, but the team made it back to their stealth ship and launched before the hangar could be sealed. War Master Zalkeen watched in fury as the human ship escaped. But his rage turned to shock when reports flooded in from across his fleet. The truth files were spreading through Council networks faster than they could be contained. Even worse, his own crew members were reading them and beginning to question their orders. On Earth, President Hamilton received word of Sophie's successful mission at the same time. Dr. Amy Lou reported a breakthrough. The new weapon was ready for testing. They called it Prometheus Fire, and it exploited the fundamental flaw in Council faster than light drives. Admiral Crane ordered the immediate deployment of Prometheus Fire across the entire human fleet. Every ship was equipped with the new weapon within 48 hours. The rushed production and installation was risky, but humanity had no choice. War Master Zalkeen was preparing a final massive assault on Earth itself. The Council fleet gathered for their attack. Zalkeen had 500 ships and he was determined to end this war. The humans had been lucky so far, but luck would not stop overwhelming firepower. He ordered his fleet to advance in a dense formation that would allow overlapping fields of fire. Admiral Crane met them with every ship humanity could muster. The human fleet numbered just over 200 vessels, including many damaged craft that had been hastily repaired. The odds still favored the Council, but this time humanity had a secret weapon. The 2 fleets closed on each other near Earth's orbit. The distance shrank rapidly and weapons came into range. War Master Zalkeen prepared to give the order to fire. He would reduce Earth to ash and finally end this troublesome rebellion. Then Admiral Crane spoke a single word. Fire. Every human ship activated Prometheus Fire simultaneously. The weapon emitted a precise electromagnetic pulse tuned to the exact frequency of Council faster than light drives. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Across the Council fleet, drive systems began to cascade failure. Safety systems tried to compensate, but the pulse had been designed to override those protections. Reactors went critical as the drives tore themselves apart. 347 Council ships exploded in the span of 30 seconds. The few surviving Council vessels that had been shielded by their companions tried to retreat. Their crews were in complete panic. Nothing in their history had prepared them for this. War Master Zalkeen's flagship was among the survivors, but it was heavily damaged and limping away at sublight speed. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. The Galactic Council had just suffered the worst military defeat in their 10,000-year history. And it had been delivered by a species they had tried to enslave. Every species wanted to chain Earth. Now they're on their knees, Part 4. The wreckage of the Council fleet drifted in Earth's orbit like a graveyard of broken dreams. President Hamilton stood at the observation window of the orbital command station and watched recovery teams move through the debris. Humanity had won a great victory, but she knew the war was not over. The Council still controlled hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships across the galaxy. A wounded enemy was often the most dangerous. Admiral Crane entered the room with urgent intelligence reports. Agent Danny Price had intercepted communication from the Council homeworld. The leadership was in chaos and arguing about how to respond. Some wanted to negotiate peace while others demanded total war. But one faction was pushing for something far worse. They wanted to authorize the use of planet-killer weapons. Hamilton felt her blood run cold. Planet killers had been banned by the Council itself 8,000 years ago, after they nearly destroyed an entire star system. The weapons were kept in secure vaults and were never supposed to be used again. But desperate beings made terrible choices. General Nathan Cross burst into the room with additional intelligence. Council forces were mobilizing their remaining military assets from across the galaxy. They were gathering at a staging point near the galactic core. Worse yet, the intelligence suggested they were retrieving the planet-killer weapons from storage. The Council intended to make an example of Earth that would terrify any other species considering rebellion. Hamilton made her decision quickly. Humanity could not wait for the Council to bring those weapons to Earth. They had to take the fight to the enemy. She authorized Operation Broken Chain. Human forces would strike at Council infrastructure across multiple star systems simultaneously. The goal was not just military victory, but liberation of enslaved species. Captain Aaron Knight received his orders within the hour. He would lead an assault on the Council's primary shipyard at Kepler, 442. The shipyard had been producing Council vessels for 3,000 years, and destroying it would cripple their ability to rebuild their fleet. Aaron gathered his captains and briefed them on the mission. They would have 30 ships against a defending force of over 100. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace and emerged at the edge of the Kepler system. The shipyard was a massive orbital structure surrounding a small moon. Council defense ships moved to intercept, but Aaron had learned from every previous battle. His fleet split into 6 groups that attacked from different vectors simultaneously. The Council defenders tried to maintain formation, but the human ships moved too fast and too unpredictably. Aaron led one group in a direct assault on the shipyard's main reactor. His ships dodged defensive fire and launched kinetic missiles that punched through the station's shields. The reactor went critical and Aaron ordered his fleet to retreat. The explosion lit up the system like a newborn star. The shipyard that had built Council warships for millennia was reduced to expanding gases and twisted metal. Aaron's fleet jumped away before Council reinforcements could arrive. They had lost 3 ships but accomplished their mission. Across the galaxy, similar strikes were happening. Human forces hit Council supply depots and communication relays and military bases. Each attack was quick and brutal, and designed to spread chaos through Council-controlled space. Meanwhile, Specialist Vanessa Cole was conducting a different kind of warfare. She had penetrated deep into Council computer networks and was spreading a virus that did not destroy data, but revealed it. Every enslaved species in Council territory suddenly had access to historical records, showing how they had been conquered and subjugated. The truth was spreading faster than the Council could contain it. On the Vrin homeworld, the insectoid population rose in rebellion. They had been enslaved for 4,000 years and forced to mine rare minerals for the Council. Now they knew the truth. The Vrin workers seized control of the mines and drove out Council overseers. Their queen broadcast a message of defiance that inspired other enslaved species. The Kelthrons were an aquatic species that had been conquered 3,000 years earlier. Their ocean world had been turned into a food production center for Council elites. When the truth reached them, the Kelthrons destroyed the Council garrison on their planet. They reclaimed their seas and refused to send any more tribute. Rebellion spread like wildfire. Dozens of species saw that freedom was possible. The Council empire that had stood for 10 millennia was crumbling from within. On the Council homeworld, High Chancellor Mordak watched his empire collapse. Reports flooded in from every sector. Military defeats and rebellions and systems going dark as species cut themselves off from Council control. Mordak had ruled for 600 years and never imagined this could happen. The other Council leaders demanded action. They blamed Mordak for underestimating humanity. They argued among themselves while their civilization burned. Finally, Mordak silenced them all with a declaration. If the Council could not rule the galaxy, then no one would. He authorized the immediate deployment of every planet-killer weapon in their arsenal. The decision was met with shocked silence. Some Council members protested, but Mordak would not be swayed. Earth had to be destroyed as an example. Then any species that continued to rebel would face the same fate. Fear would restore order where force had failed. 150 Council ships were recalled and equipped with planet-killer weapons. Each weapon could crack a planet's crust and render it lifeless. The fleet was placed under the command of High Admiral Kreenak, who had orders to use the weapons without hesitation. General Nathan Cross received intelligence about the Council's plan within days. The spy networks that Agent Danny Price had established were still functioning despite Council efforts to shut them down. The intelligence was detailed and terrifying. The Council fleet would arrive at Earth within 2 weeks. President Hamilton called an emergency meeting of all military leaders. They faced an impossible choice. If they stayed to defend Earth, the planet killers would be used. But if they fled, then the Council would hunt down every human colony. There was no way to win by running. Admiral Crane proposed a desperate plan. The human fleet would meet the Council armada before it reached Earth. They would fight in deep space where the planet killers could not be used without risking damage to Council ships. It was risky, but it was their only chance. Hamilton authorized the plan and issued a call for help. Messages were sent to every species that had rebelled against the Council. Humanity had fought for their freedom, and now they asked others to stand with them. The response was overwhelming. The Vryn sent their war fleets. The Kelthrans launched their submarines converted into space vessels. Species that had been enemies under Council rule came together as allies. They all understood that if Earth fell, the rebellions would be crushed one by one. Within 10 days, the largest free fleet in galactic history assembled near Earth. 230 ships from 15 different species prepared for the final battle. They came from different worlds and had different biologies, but they shared one thing. They all refused to live as slaves. Admiral Crane stood on the bridge of her flagship surrounded by holographic displays showing the Allied fleet. Ships of every shape and size filled the formation. Some were military vessels, but many were converted civilian craft crewed by beings who had never fought before. They had come because they believed freedom was worth dying for. The Council fleet appeared on sensors exactly when predicted. 150 ships carrying planet-killer weapons and protected by the last of Council military might. High Admiral Krenak sent a message demanding immediate surrender. He promised quick deaths if they complied. Admiral Crane broadcast her response to both fleets. She spoke simply and clearly. The age of the Council was over. The galaxy belonged to free peoples now. If the Council wanted war, they would have it, but they would not have victory. The distance between the fleets shrank steadily. Weapons came online and shields powered up. The final battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin. Every species wanted to chain Earth. Now they're on their knees, Part 5. The two fleets faced each other in the darkness between stars. Admiral Crane watched the Council armada advance with mechanical precision. High Admiral Krenak commanded 150 ships carrying weapons that could end worlds. Against him stood 230 vessels from 15 different species who had never fought together before. Commander Ben Harper had spent months developing a tactical system that would coordinate the Allied fleet. Each species had different communication methods and weapon systems. The Vryn thought in hive patterns while the Kelthrans used sonic frequencies. Ben had created a translation matrix that allowed all ships to work as one unit. Now they would see if it actually functioned in combat. The Council fleet maintained tight formation as they closed the distance. They had overwhelming firepower and weapons designed to crack planets. High Admiral Krenak was confident that this battle would restore Council dominance. He opened a channel and demanded one final surrender. The response was silence. Admiral Crane gave the signal. The Allied fleet moved as one. Ships scattered in patterns that looked random but were carefully calculated. Vryn fighters swarmed forward using their hive coordination to attack from 1,000 angles. Kelthran vessels released sonic pulses that disrupted Council targeting systems. Human ships darted through the chaos, delivering precision strikes. The Council fleet fired their conventional weapons, but the Allied forces were too dispersed. Energy beams cut through empty space where ships had been moments before. High Admiral Krenak realized too late that his tight formation was a weakness. The Allied fleet used their diversity as strength. Each species contributed something unique, and together they were unpredictable. The destroyer EUS Valiant, commanded by Captain Laura Scott, found herself cut off from the main fleet. 3 Council heavy cruisers surrounded her ship. Laura could have tried to break through, but her sensors showed a Vryn transport full of civilians nearby. The transport was unarmed and helpless. Laura made her choice without hesitation. She ordered full power to engines and rammed her ship into the lead Council cruiser. The impact was catastrophic. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire. The other 2 Council ships were damaged by debris and the Vryn transport escaped. Laura and her crew of 43 died but saved hundreds. Lieutenant Pete Morgan led a fighter squadron of 20 small craft. Their job was to harass Council capital ships and draw fire away from larger vessels. Pete's squadron flew into the teeth of enemy defenses. Council point defense systems tracked them with lethal accuracy. Fighters exploded around him, but Pete kept flying. His squadron gave the main fleet crucial seconds to reposition. Only 3 of his 20 pilots survived, but their sacrifice mattered. The battle raged for hours. Ships on both sides were destroyed. The void filled with debris and expanding clouds of gas. Admiral Crane coordinated the Allied fleet while taking heavy fire herself. Her flagship shuddered under repeated impacts but held together. High Admiral Krenak grew desperate. His fleet was taking losses he had not anticipated. These primitive species were fighting with a ferocity and creativity that defied all Council experience. He made a fatal decision. He ordered 3 ships to activate their planet killer weapons and target the largest concentration of Allied vessels. The planet killers began their charge sequence. The weapons drew enormous power and would be ready to fire in minutes. If they fired in space, the explosion would destroy everything in a wide radius, including many Council ships. But Krenak was willing to accept those losses to end this battle. Sergeant Mike Chen was leading a boarding party that had managed to attach to one of the Council ships carrying a planet killer. His team of 12 Marines cut through the hull and fought their way inside. Council security forces tried to stop them, but the humans moved with brutal efficiency. Mike's team reached the weapon chamber with minutes to spare. Engineer Grace Matthews was part of Mike's team. She studied the planet killer weapon while fighting raged around her. The device was massive and complex, but Grace understood the principles. Instead of trying to deactivate it, she reprogrammed the targeting system. If the weapon was going to fire, she would choose the target. Mike and his team fought their way back to their shuttle. Grace worked until the last possible second. She changed the weapon's target and set it to detonate on a frequency that would not destroy but disable. Then she ran. The 3 planet killer weapons fired simultaneously, but instead of destroying the Allied fleet, the weapons released a massive electromagnetic pulse tuned to the exact frequency of Council ship systems. It was Prometheus fire multiplied 1,000 times. Every remaining Council ship lost power in an instant. Their reactors shut down. Their weapons went offline. Their shields collapsed. 127 Council vessels drifted helplessly in space. High Admiral Krenak sat in darkness on his bridge and realized he had lost everything. Admiral Crane surveyed the battlefield. Her fleet had taken heavy losses. 58 Allied ships were destroyed and many more were damaged. Thousands had died, but the Council fleet was defeated. She prepared to give the order to destroy the helpless enemy vessels. Then she stopped. Admiral Crane thought about all the species that had suffered under Council rule. She thought about the billions who had been enslaved. Destroying these ships would be justice, but it would also make humanity no better than the Council. She opened a channel to all ships. Her voice was tired but clear. Stand down. Offer assistance to damaged vessels. Provide medical aid to the wounded. The order was met with shock from some commanders, but no one disobeyed. Human and Allied forces began rescuing Council survivors. Medical teams moved between ships, treating the injured regardless of which side they had fought for. The Council crews could not understand what was happening. They expected execution or enslavement. Instead, they received mercy. High Admiral Krenak was brought before President Hamilton aboard a neutral station. His hands were bound, but he was unharmed. He stood with whatever dignity he could maintain and waited for judgment. Hamilton looked at the alien who had tried to destroy her world. She spoke quietly. Your council is finished. Your empire is broken. But your species do not have to die. We offer you a choice. Join a new alliance based on freedom and mutual respect, or return to your worlds and rebuild in peace. We will not chain you as you tried to chain us. Krenak struggled to comprehend. In council culture, the defeated were always enslaved or destroyed. Mercy was weakness, but he saw no weakness in Hamilton's eyes. He saw strength that came from principles rather than power. Across former council space, humanity and its allies began the work of liberation. Captain Sam Rogers led relief convoys to worlds that had been stripped of resources. Dr. Patricia Lane established hospitals on planets where council had denied medical care. Engineer Tony Valdez helped rebuild infrastructure destroyed by centuries of exploitation. Within a year, the Galactic Council ceased to exist. In its place rose the Free Worlds Coalition. 23 species joined immediately. More applied every week. The coalition charter was simple. Every species had the right to determine their own future. Technology would be shared freely. Disputes would be resolved through dialogue. The former council species were welcomed as equals once they agreed to the charter. Many accepted. Some chose isolation. All were allowed to make their choice without coercion. Admiral Crane retired and took a position as coordinator of coalition defense forces. She worked alongside former enemies including Vector, the crystalline being who had first demanded Earth's surrender. They stood together on the observation deck of coalition headquarters watching ships from dozens of species arrive. Vector's crystalline body shifted with emotion. "We were wrong about humans. We thought power came from control. You showed us it comes from freedom." Crane smiled. "We did not want war. We just refused to be slaves. And in refusing chains, you broke them for everyone. The galaxy will never be the same." On Earth, in a small apartment in Chicago, factory worker Greg Patterson watched the coalition assembly with his daughter Emma on his lap. His hands bore scars from years of wartime work. Emma asked if they really won. Greg looked at his daughter and thought of everyone who had sacrificed so she could grow up free. "Yes, sweetheart, we won, and we made sure everyone else could be free too." Across the galaxy on hundreds of liberated worlds, beings looked to the stars with hope. The species that the Council tried to enslave had become the liberator of all. Humanity had learned that freedom is not given but taken, and once taken it must be shared with all who desire it. The age of chains was over. The age of freedom had begun, and it started because one species, when offered slavery, simply said no.